going to talk about this in a little bit, I think, could really assess what the need was, for example, around PPE, how many businesses needed PPE, how many individuals needed PPE, and how we would get that PPE out to people. So it was an incredible feat, came together really quickly, and we've continued to meet. We're down to meeting once a month now, and it's been incredibly, incredibly successful what we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Lori, did you want to go next?
Yeah, and I'll build on that. So thanks, Heather. So again, using this kind of incident command strategy, we had kind of a 1 week rhythm. And so we would set objectives for the week. And so we had Greg, Heather, and I just kind of got together from based on what we heard, set objectives, gave the group 1 week to accomplish them. And so for instance, PPE, when that push came out, we had a lot of families, businesses who needed either cloth masks or surgical masks and never had sourced them before. So it was really hard. They were hard to find anyway. So we had a logistics team that would source the materials, source the PPE. Where is it? How do we find it? Do we have to pay for it? We had a finance team that applied for and received grant money for PPE. We have public information that was able to get the word out for the people that needed it, how they access it, how do we get it distributed? And then it really helped our operations units. So those businesses, a lot of small profits received PPE, in addition to some of our high risk populations, like some of our folks in general assistance housing, who are really, could be medically compromised, who need that kind of protection. So that strategy was able to get this to where it needed to go. So we had a team effort to coordinate this. It wasn't up to one person or one organization to do it all for themselves. And it really allowed them to do their job. They didn't have to worry about every single detail. They just had to still worry about their focus. And so as Heather was saying, we had these leads and we went for people that were subject matter experts. We're already doing a lot of this work to lead that team because they really helped inform what the needs were and what our objectives should be for the next week. Okay. Either Greg or Heather want to add on, but I think it's just kind of our strategy that we've been using.
That's excellent. Thanks so much. And I'm really impressed by how concise you guys were with 3 people presenting. Anything else, Heather or Greg, you want to add?
I'll just mention that the transition that's really happened. It is amazing how quickly things came together, how effective the group was, and a real shift has happened from sort of meeting really basic, immediate needs, like where can people get food? Are we working with state officials to get food drops in the community? Where can we move folks out of congregate housing and shelter to hotels? And now the transition is really about how can we address some of the systemic underlying issues in those 5 areas that Heather mentioned. So the group is continuing to meet. Incident command systems are generally a matter of hours or days that they're supposed to function, and we're going almost 6 months. So that mental health side is a piece that we talk about for ourselves as well, because it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, I bet.
And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Well, thank all of you for the hard work that you've been doing to keep this going and to support communities in the county. So I want to turn to everyone else, and I actually changed my mind. I would like to go around and do introductions because I think it would be helpful to know who is on the screen here. The easiest way to do that is just go around and call in people individually, but I'll just ask you to just your name and brief affiliation. We will have plenty of time to get into any other description or things that are on your mind. So model, Jenna Koloski, Council on Rural Development. Pamela, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Pam Opperly. I work for Easter Seals and Intensive Family-Based Services. So I'm working really with families who are in crisis to begin with, and COVID presented, amplified crises for these families.
Great, well, we'll want to hear more about your work. Carrie? Carrie, we can't hear you. If you want to put it in the chat, I can say it and then you could work on your sound.
Can you hear me now or no?
We can.
Okay, great. Must be my headphones. I'm from Lamoille Housing Partnership. We're Lamoille County as well as Hardwick's nonprofit affordable housing developer.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Pat? Pat, you're on.
Oh, I'm muted.
There we go.
Yep.
You're unmuted now. Oh, now you're
Muted,
muted.
Okay, I'm Reverend Pat Thompson. I live in Morrisville, but I am the co-pastor for the Wolcott United Methodist Church.
Wonderful.
And I to see what we could do for missions.
Thanks. Representative Biakabon? Dave? Can you
Yes.
hear us?
I'm sorry. I heard representative, but thought maybe there was more than one.
I think you're
Hi,
the
I'm
only
Rebecca
one.
Boney. Okay. All right. I'm the state representative for Elmore, Morristown, Worcester, and Woodbury. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Teresa?
Teresa Snow with Salvation Farms.
Thanks, Teresa. Donna?
Edna's
Well,
done.
yes, hi, I'm Donna Sherwa, and I'm with the Vermont Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, and I also work with the OSSU Project Aware Grant.
Wonderful. Thanks. Polly?
Hi, I'm Polly Major, and I'm a field representative for Senator Leahy.
And we heard from Heather. Heather, did you say the organization that you work with?
Can't remember.
I
It's been a
can't
long day.
Go ahead.
I'm executive director of Lamoille Restorative Center, restorative justice organization in our community.
Thanks, Heather. Will?
Hi, Will Everly. I'm the HS Field Director for the Morrisville, Barry, and Hartford districts.
Great. Josh?
Hi, everyone. Josh Hanford, Commissioner of Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development.
Valerie?
Valerie Valcor, Public Health Nurse, Morrisville District Office.
Great. Thanks, Valerie. And is it Yvonne Miller? Yvonne Miller?
Oh, Evangelist Miller.
Oh, it's just abbreviated.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's evangelist?
Yes.
Okay.
Or Reverend. Yes.
great.
I have a community, a nonprofit. It's called Under the Wings Community Youth Outreach. I work with families to make sure the kids are ready to go back to school. And
Wonderful. Thanks. Jeff?
I'm Jeff Hunsberger. I'm with the Lamoille Family Center and the Youth and Young Adult Program Manager. I live out in Eden, and I'm also the operations chief for the Laws Rock Group.
Wonderful. Phil?
Hi, everybody. Phil Morin. I work at Hunger Free Vermont and am based in Burlington, but I popped onto this call this evening because I actually grew up in Eden and have lots of family still in Lamoille County.
Great. Thanks for being on the call. Allison?
I'm Allison Calderera. I'm the Chief of Programs and Advancement for Capstone Community Action. And it's a relatively new position, and I have been placed in Lamoille County to do some work, and I'm really interested in finding out more about the needs and the systems that exist here and how Capstone can bring some energy and excitement to making things work better.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Anna?
Anna Kern, I'm the program community projects manager. What's my title? For the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department and also the planning chief for Laws Rock.
Great. Laws Rock is well represented tonight. Chris?
I'm Chris Meehan with the Vermont Food Bank.
Thanks, Chris. Greg, do you want to, I'm not sure if you said your role at Capstone.
Yep, so I'm the Lamoille area manager over at Capstone Community Action and part of Laws Rock.
Great. And I see, is it Joe? Are you on the line? Joe Sable Courtney?
Hi, Joe Sable Courtney. I'm running for the House seat in Stowe, and I'm here to listen and learn and enormously grateful to every single one of you guys. So thank you.
Thanks. And I think that's Gina, that's Lamoille County Planning Commission.
Yeah, I'm just this logo here. I'm with the Lamoille County Planning Commission, and I'm your scribe for the evening.
Yes, Gina is taking detailed notes for the conversation, and we appreciate it. Trish?
I'm your neighbor on the other side of Eden Notch in Lowell. And we have a mutual aid group, Lowell, J, Westfield, Troy area. So I'm here to listen and learn how you're doing, especially, and how do you spell that acronym of the group that you all are working on?
Maybe
And
somebody
I'll
could
put
type
in
it into the chat. Thanks, Trish. And I think if there were an award for the most of these county forums attended, I think Trish may, except for maybe me and Paul, I think Trish may win. So really glad to have you on, Trish. Susan. Susan, are you there? We can't hear you, but I see that you're unmuted. There was a sound.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Susan Roussel with Lamoille Community Food Share.
Wonderful. Oh, good. You made it on.
Yeah, sorry.
And then Kate, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Kate Donnelly. I'm a therapist in the community. I'm a steering committee member of the Racial Equity Alliance of Lamoille, and I'm currently a candidate for the House of Representatives for Vermont.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate that. It's just helpful to know who's here and what a great group we have. So I look forward to the conversation. So let's dive in. And Gina, I'm going to switch things up on you a little bit. I'm sorry. But I'm actually going to start. I'd love to first start with challenges. I know that this is an incredibly challenging time. We are seeing unprecedented challenges in our communities. But I would just love to hear from you all. What are you seeing on the ground? What are people experiencing in terms of food access, housing, childcare, healthcare, any of those essential community needs? What are people seeing on the ground today? And you can either use the raised hands function, that's fine, or just unmute and kind of wave at me or shout at me, whatever works. Does somebody want to start sharing a challenge? Yes, go ahead. And should I call you Evangelist Miller? Is that how you'd like to be?
You could call me Barbara. I'll be fine with it.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay. So what I'm seeing is like a housing and like people down at the Oxbow. I've been taking food down there to help out. So it's a lot of housing, and without the housing, it's hard for them to really prepare, to be able to prepare food.
Yeah.
Which they can't be down at the Oxbow after 12 now, for whatever reason, but that's a lot what I'm seeing, a lack of housing.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Preparation for food.
Thanks, Barbara. Does
You're
someone
welcome.
else want to share?
If I could just build on that, we're seeing, and you probably know these numbers, but we've got a little over 70 individuals or families that are staying in our three local hotels, one out in Jeffersonville, one in Morrisville, and one in Stowe. And our resources are tapped out. We have vouchers to provide for a lot of those folks, but having the resources to process all those folks are pretty difficult. 40 some of them are Lamoille Valley people, and the rest of them are coming in from other areas on GA vouchers. They're all sitting in there on GA vouchers. So that's a huge strain on our system, and it's a huge strain on the state system overall. But if there's one really pressure point, that's one of the biggest pressure points we have right now, is the housing issue.
Wow. And so they're housed there temporarily. Okay. Thank you, Corey, for some, and Carrie for acronym translation. Other challenges folks want to share that you're seeing? Carrie?
Oh, geez. I just wanted to echo Jeff and Barbara's comments about just the lack of housing. As the affordable housing developer in the area, we're fielding probably more calls now since COVID happened. And I'm sure that a lot of the calls that we get are also being received by a lot of you on the call as well. I often forward people to your agencies too if we can't provide housing right away. We're not the emergency provider, we're long term.
Right.
So yeah.
But you're fielding more calls now than you have before. Wow.
Hey, Jenna, this is Greg, and I guess we'll keep going down the housing path here that Barbara started us on, because it's really a significant issue in our community. And I think it's sort of a tale of two extremes, because as Jeff pointed out, we have a significant number of people who are experiencing homelessness in a community where you have people who might own multiple homes or own a home where they only live, for a couple of weeks during the year. And so that disparity, creates a lot of challenge. We're a community that has amazing recreation opportunities, but also, some of the highest poverty rates and some of the highest child poverty rates in the state. So it's a beautiful, wonderful place to live, but it's difficult to fully enjoy if you can't afford to enjoy it. So trying to address those disparities is a real challenge. And on the housing front, we've been trying to do a lot of outreach to our landlord partners in the community. And there are programs that exist right now to help with renovating spaces. We've got an amazing housing support team in our community. The vouchers exist to help make sure that people have the financial support to pay for a place once they get into it. We just don't have the places for people to live. And again, stings a little bit in a community where we know we have living units that aren't occupied most of the year.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Nancy's great.
Other challenges, and what about, I think housing, we've certainly documented as a challenge. Are there other areas? Food access, is childcare a challenge in the county? What are you seeing there? Valerie?
This is Valerie. Yeah, and I'm actually, it's more of a question for the group, because as a public health nurse, obviously my focus recently has been on the testing. And now we're branching more into what we call outreach prevention response. So when there is when there are cases or question of an outbreak, we get involved with more of the broader perspective of response beyond the contact tracing. But my question to the group is, in terms of disparity and access, are you finding, because I speculate and I hear this sort of anecdotally, that people are not going to their medical provider because of the fear of contacting COVID. At our testing sites, I wonder if people know about what's being available, what is available. I think communication is a challenge, getting the word out, and access to these testing. So that's sort of a question that I have for you all.
Does anyone have thoughts they want to share on that, what you're seeing? Corey?
I do, yeah. Val, good question. And so again, I did also hear today, again, anecdotally, that people are still fearful of going to their primary care and to the hospital because of COVID. And I know that part of LAWSRAC, we've been putting in our newsletter and just sharing all the places that you can get tested and how, like, who to call and what those contact numbers are. But again, we're still probably not reaching everyone that needs it. So still quite open to how to share that information.
Well, let's think, when we kind of get to thinking about some ideas, let's kind of put a pin in that as something to look at. So I've kind of circled communication as a challenge that maybe we could think about together. Others, and I want to point out, Barbara, Susan in the chat is responding to your concern about getting food to folks at the Oxbow. And she's saying that she's put her email there to reach out to her to think together about that. I just saw a raised hand and now I can't remember. Oh, Pat, go ahead.
I just ran into a situation yesterday where an individual did not have a primary care provider, and he was quite sick and trying to get tested. Spent, I guess, some time with Kinney's Drugs and some time with Fanny Allen, and just gave up because he thought. And so I called Alden Lawner, the hospital chaplain, last night and asked him what to do, and he just gave me the number at Copley. And so I called this individual and he got tested today, I think.
Wow.
But even the places where like Kinney's or Fanny Allen doesn't seem to know what to do if you don't have a primary care person.
Corey?
Yep. And so Pat, thank you also for bringing that up. So a couple things here. So on our website, we just did update the Copley website. I'm a nurse in the Copley's quality department.
Okay.
So we do curbside testing, and we really prefer that someone's primary care order that test. So of course, what happens when someone does not have a primary care practitioner? There is a number, and I will put it in the chat here again for everybody to see, but it's on our website, that if you do not have a primary care practitioner and you think you need to get tested, you call this number and they'll do some triage with you, ask some questions, get you tested if you need to, and then also can make a referral to a specialist, like a community health specialist, to get you connected to a primary care provider. Because we want to make sure that people that don't have one get one. Okay, great. I'll post that.
Yeah, go ahead and plug that in the chat. That's great. Other challenges before we move on to other questions? What are you seeing around food access? Does it feel like people's needs are being, I know we talked about the kind of situation at the Oxbow and the housing situation, but more broadly, are people's needs met? Are there enough, is emergency food available? What are people seeing there?
This is Susan from the food chair. Oh,
go ahead, Susan, and then Jeff next.
Okay. So our visits have increased by about 37-38% for July and August. Before that, it was about 28%. And looking at September, it's probably going to be about 42 or 43%. So, we are concerned about the numbers and how that's looking as we head into colder weather. We do have sources of food, and thankfully, our budget is healthy. We did lose some food that we've gotten from the food bank. Recently, there was a big change to boxed food that was being delivered to us to supply to people in the community, and we no longer will receive that. So that's definitely make a big dent in our budget to replace that. We're also looking at Thanksgiving. And so, we have a lot of concern about the numbers. But, the fact that the schools have been feeding people all summer long, and there's been all these other, meals available from all sorts of different sources, and the fresh produce that's been available, things have been going well. But as I said, our numbers are steadily increasing.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And Jeff, you were going to go next, and then I see your hand, Dave.
Yeah, from the Laws Rock perspective and the food group that's been working, we see some great operational things happening on a local level in some towns, and then we see other towns who have no infrastructure, no volunteers, and what we've been trying to strategize around is building a centralized food hub where we can get food into. I mean, this certainly wouldn't take the place of the food shelves that are already operational. It would be trying to supply and support them as much as possible. But for some of the outlying areas, the Edens, the Belvederes, the Watervilles, some other places that don't have any infrastructure to support some of these things, trying to find a way to operationalize distribution out that way.
Well, Jeff, let's get a little bit more into that when we start to talk strategy. But as a challenge, I think that is, I've documented that it varies by town, that you might have more central locations, but these more, I mean, it's all really rural, but these even more rural communities on the outskirts are having trouble with access. Why don't we go Dave and then Donna, and then I want to move on to our next question, but sticking with challenges for now. Go ahead.
It's hard for me to stay within a box.
Well, we're in the challenges box right now.
Okay. What we're hearing is when there's deep poverty, there are needs across the spectrum. Our community had an unemployment rate of 25.6% in April, highest in the state. Now we're down to around 5.9% now, I think second highest in the state. But my point is, when you have unemployment that high, the magnitude of insecurity and not feeling safe that reverberates through many families and individuals takes its toll for many, many months. And I think that the fear is that if there's another wave, have some great teams like we do now, but how do we mitigate that? So I apologize for not keeping in sequence perhaps with your questions.
No, I think that fits squarely within the challenges box for
this
sure.
Is what poverty, yeah, this is what poverty looks like.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Let's finish challenges with Donna, and then we'll move on to another question. Go ahead, Donna.
All right, so I got 6 points here. So with the question regard, yes,
okay,
how I work.
I hope they're short points.
All right, so in regards to the food piece, when I've been transporting food to people's homes, what I'm hearing is a lot of them are saying, we got enough canned goods. What they're really wanting is the healthy stuff. They want the eggs, the fruit and the vegetables, the milk, the cheese and stuff like that. But I have been hearing like they're overwhelmed with canned goods. So just going to give you that little heads up. So along with that, obviously, is transportation issues because the families are not able to get to resources. So that's 2, that's quick. Number 3, we're having internet issues that people are experiencing, which I know we're focused on food, but you said you want challenges. So internet issues. Number 4 is the lack of health care. There are still individuals who do not have health care at all, or the costs are so much that they're losing their health care. And then that throws into the effects that mental health has not only on the adults, but also on the children, because it's just interplaying with each other. And finally, I work with individuals who have substance use, and they may stay at the detox center, and we may not be able to take them because of fear of COVID, because they're from out of state or whatever. And so we still have people that are going to jail because COVID is definitely impacting that too. So, okay, done.
Thanks so much, Donna. Yeah, those are all excellent points. I want to move on, but I'll just say, I mean, Donna, your last points and many things that we're hearing, we've had 12 of these forums now around the state, and these are things that we're hearing echoed in every county. And so certainly challenges that we're all facing in a new and different way today. But I'd love to just shift really briefly, and this is like a hard shift, so I'm sorry, it's like whiplash, but to go from challenges to be thinking a little bit more visionary. Like a lot of people around the state are thinking, we want to recover, but we don't want to recover back to what we were. Like, this is an opportunity for a transformational moment in Vermont history to say, well, what do we want these systems to look like? How can we take these things we've learned and put them into place in the future? And I just wonder in Lamoille County, what do you want to see? What are the things that you'd like to hold on to or see shifting in the future? What do you want for your community when you think about meeting these needs? What would it look like if you were to achieve meeting these family and individual needs that you're all working so hard on? Val? Is it Val or Valerie? Do you prefer Val?
Either one.
Okay,
Either one's
go ahead.
fine. Actually, this thought popped into my head when Jeff was talking about the disparities in the towns without infrastructure, and it just made me think about the mutual aid agreements that we have for environmental hazards and for weather-related hazards, and working with the emergency management directors of the towns. So one vision could be having similar types of mutual aid agreements with between towns, because I mean, there's just these relationships through emergency management directors and work with environmental hazards that have been established already between some of these towns.
Yeah. Thank you. Kate, you have a hand raised.
Yeah, maybe sort of echoing Val's comment. I think one of the things that's really stood out to me are the mutual aid programs that have been established, less institutionalized, but more just among neighbors. And like one person was talking about the challenge being that those haven't necessarily extended to certain towns that don't have infrastructure in place. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is how powerful it would be to have a coordinated mutual aid program that was county-wide. You know, a lot of these needs that we're seeing are exacerbated by COVID, but they exist outside of COVID. There are neighbors that can't leave to get groceries. There are neighbors that can't leave to get their prescriptions, and that don't fall into the categories of many of the programs of the people that are on this call. And so how to have sort of systems in place to support people in those ways.
Great, thanks. So were there, and maybe Val, maybe you said this and I missed it, but there were mutual aid groups that kind of came together in different parts of the county?
Well, one example would be flooding. So flooding is something that happens very, very frequently in Vermont, especially in the Lamoille Valley. So if you think about the relation, Cambridge and Johnson, they have robust, well, we'll say robust. They have very well-trained swift water teams and such, as an example. Waterville and Eden do not. So they have established some relationships that are, you know, towns that border each other, or they just know that, you know, that they're going to share equipment, they're going to share, and sometimes this happens organically before the state gets involved. And yeah, so.
Thanks. Dave, your hand is up.
Yes, I'd like to see a livable wage. And if employers can't pay a livable wage, some type of income redistribution to provide a level of income maintenance that allows folks to live in dignity.
Thank you. I see some applause for that. Any other vision points?
Hey, Jenna, it's Greg.
Go ahead.
I guess just another one of the lessons learned, you know, from our experience with the Lazrock group is we had a planning team, a logistics team, and public information team, and each of those had multiple people who were involved. And while those are maybe sort of standard when you think about sort of the planning commissions within towns and at the county level, and focusing on sort of physical infrastructure. In the health and human service world, it was like something we had never seen or experienced before. You know, people who had those skills and could bring that resource, so that the people whose expertise was sorting, you know, food or looking at how mental health issues are exacerbated in a pandemic can do that work, but to have others who are figuring out what's the message, you know, for this week, or what are some objectives that we want to set within the employment world for this next month for our community, and in investment in that kind of infrastructure for our health and human services world. We've already seen, and we can point to numerous examples within our community of having those kind of resources and being a game changer. Those are not the kind of supports that a Lamoille Family Center, a Lamoille Restorative Center, a Capstone typically invests in, but having access to them, we have learned so much. And so we're making our pitch to our local legislators and funders that those are the kind of supports that we need if we want to talk about some visionary and long-term systemic changes.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Pam?
I think if we could have public transportation, the whole transportation piece is so difficult for families living in poverty. They just can't afford to keep cars on the road, and they live far from, the grocery store and the doctor's office. And some kind of ride share or public transportation would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we're moving into some more concrete ideas, which I love. Before we get there, I do want to just hear from you all. I mean, unless, did someone else have a vision point that you wanted to share? Anyone we haven't heard from that's just sitting there waiting and dying? Anna, go ahead.
So patient. The coffee is finally worn off. To talk about the food distribution issues that we're seeing with Lost Rock, especially with cold storage or frozen foods, or getting the milk and cheese and eggs out to people like Val was talking about. We really need dedicated locations in every town that has a freezer or a fridge space, and then a mutual aid group or a team of volunteers or an organization that will take on the distribution. Like Jeff was saying, some towns really have this squared away minus the freezer space. And other towns need the freezers plus the kind of building the volunteer network to make that happen. But if all the frozen food is sitting in Morrisville, what we know is that it doesn't get out to people, and some of it gets composted, and it's just that's not how that's supposed to be working.
Yeah. Thanks, Anna. Well, I'd love to hear, to shift for a second and hear what's going on a little bit more. I mean, we've heard a little bit about the response in Lamoille County, but what else is going on in the county in terms of addressing what's working today? And I think of this in a couple ways. One way to think of it is just an opportunity to share with folks that are on this call and to share, to have in the notes, but also, one of the charges from the governor to the action team, to Commissioner Hanford that's here, and to Paul and the team, is to collect these recovery strategies from around the state and to share them back to other regions, to tell folks what's going on, and to share them up to the governor and to the administration, and to kind of, so it's a chance to brag about the work that you're already doing in Lamoille County as well. So when you think about the work to meet childcare needs, housing needs, food needs, healthcare needs, what's working today? Is there anything that you want to share that you or others are working on?
Jenna, it's Corey. I might just put in a couple things. I think part of this too, we've been able to forge a lot of great relationships and partnerships across our organizations. And so again, when you look at some of our high-risk populations, like in housing, who are homeless in our community, and really connecting them to our medical team. And so that making sure that they've got wraparound kind of case management to get them the services they need has been huge. I mean, we haven't solved their problem. They're still in GA housing, but we're trying to get them access to that medical care that they deserve. Our mental health substance misuse group, they put together almost 600 harm reduction packs, COVID specific. So they came with like hand sanitizer, PPE, in addition to Narcan and fentanyl strips, and tons of resource information. And so again, widely distributed into our nonprofit organizations, to the hospitals, to the medical community, to our law enforcement. We've really been able to do some of these really concrete projects. It's been great.
Great, thanks. Other things that people want to share?
Jenna, this is Heather. One thing that has just been striking for me is the outpouring of community support, which shouldn't surprise me, having grown up in this community and knowing how many people really want to care for their neighbors. But the number of people that wanted to volunteer and wanted to support others was really, and continues to be phenomenal. The interesting part of that is how we create infrastructure to do the dot connecting. So I think probably many of us on the call have gotten calls from other people that want to help or know somebody that wants to help. And we don't quite know how to connect the dots between those that need help and those that want to help. And so I just think about, using some of the, not just the LASROC structure that we talked about, but thinking about how we share information to volunteers and to people that need help in the community. And I think that that's really been a patchwork for a long time. And this pandemic highlighted that the patchwork really, it works in pockets, but then there are big pockets that we can't get the resources, the people, the volunteers to those folks because we don't know who they are and how to get them there. So the dot connecting seems really critical to me. And I think it requires people power and, some of those planning and logistical resources that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Thanks, Heather. Allison?
So one of the things that has struck me right now is that we're really on the cusp of looking at how systems can change. And when I look at some of the things that have been really successful or just starting to be successful, it really includes on the ground engagement with someone one-on-one. We talk a lot about affordable housing and what's available for housing, but the thing that we have to remember is that we have to have a really robust system in place of services that keep people housed, because there's many complicating factors as to why someone became homeless in the first place. So I don't want that as a strategy to get lost. And I find that it is for Capstone, we have some new folks coming online with some of the CARES funding. And I think that has a real potential to be able to keep people housed, but also if you do it right, they connect people with their primary care provider. They help them set up telehealth because so many visits are being done that way now and internet connections are poor. So that grassroots kind of engagement by a service provider, being there, looking in their home, looking in their refrigerator, sounds simple, but I really do think that it can't be dismissed when we're looking at solutions.
Thanks, Allison. When you say Capstone bringing people online, do you literally mean connecting online, or do you mean bringing into your services?
No, we received funding for a housing team leader to come into Lamoille. We also received some funding for navigation and housing support services at some of the hotels. And judging from the conversations that I've had with a few folks, I think that is just that's key, to have someone there to help people be successful and to connect them to some of the services that we're talking about. We talk a lot about people that aren't engaged. So I think that's the big piece. And the one other thing I'll say is that what we're learning in Capstone in Washington County is we don't know people. And I don't believe that we know everyone who's hungry. I think there are people that are resistant to using something called the food shelf. And I think that collaboration and partnership, especially with our primary care providers and other folks, even churches and other places where people gather to connect with them and then bring food to them. And I think that's going to be a really important part of this, is the distribution point and how we get food to people, rural, isolated people.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Susan.
Go ahead. Good. Susan, I was about to read your comment that was in chat, so would love for you to go ahead. And then Phil, I do see that your hand is up, so you'll be next.
Sorry, Phil.
It's okay.
So anyone's welcome. I did put something in chat you can read, but anyone's welcome to come and get food for anyone else. And so if you happen to have a large number of people you want to gather for at once, you could just email me and we can set that up. So if you have somebody who wants to come over and get as much food as they need and deliver it, that works.
Great, thanks, Susan. Phil, you're next, and then Greg.
Sure. I'll just add that Hunger Free Vermont does have a Hunger Council of Lamoille Valley that meets. During the pandemic, it was meeting every week and has since shifted to a every other week model and schedule. And it's chaired by Susan Bartlett and Scott Johnson from the county. And so that's another opportunity to continue conversations like these that revolve around food access and figuring out ways of supporting community members and finding out what partnerships needs to be made or strengthened, etc.
Is there anyone here that's involved with the Hunger Council in Lamoille?
I feel like I'm seeing a couple of
I feel like some
on
people
here
would
for
be.
sure. Yeah.
Great, good. And maybe you could, Phil, maybe there's a link or something you could share if people want to get involved. Greg, you are next.
Yeah, I just want to mention in terms of other strengths of the community is, in addition to people wanting to volunteer and help, also very generous community in terms of donations. And so there are a few organizations, Capstone, United Way, the Family Center, and a couple of other who've received a lot of financial donations that have allowed those monies to be used for food supports, housing supports, utilities, car repairs, basically, addressing any of the ways that folks have been impacted financially by the COVID experience. And I think the number is somewhere up around $100,000 that's been distributed in the county over the last few months. And also just another really incredible resource that kind of got repurposed in our community during this, the responding to the pandemic, was the United Way's website, which they were willing to offer. Clarissa French was amazing in allowing their website to basically be turned into a COVID-19 resource, online resource. And so as the community was developing resources, having testing drives, updates about food, we were able to have that information go to the United Way's website and get promoted. And it sort of created this, the basis for something that we're hoping to establish called an information hub, where people could go to get information online about a whole variety of resources in the community, especially if it helps people stay employed, but also that there would be people support in the form of sort of a navigator role. But the basis for that idea was the United Way's COVID-19 response page.
Great, thanks, Greg. Well, why don't we shift, thank you for sharing the work that you guys have been doing in the county. I appreciate it. I want to shift for the next 15-ish minutes until we hear from the visiting team. I'd love to hear your ideas for what is still needed. And actually in this conversation, I've already kind of captured a few ideas that people have shared. Building in, I captured kind of Greg's idea around expertise in emergency response on kind of social issues and communication and building that infrastructure, help get the word out. I captured the idea of the rideshare and public transportation need, although certainly open to thoughts on how that might happen or ideas around what that could look like. But other ideas, we had talked about challenges around communication. Heather brought up the challenges of how to connect those dots. So many people want to help, how to connect with the people who have those needs, housing, if there are ideas there. And you can think local, regional, what's needed from the state right now? What do you need in terms of support? We'd love to hear it all. So Kate, you have a hand up?
Yeah. So when Greg was running through that sort of list of questions that we could reflect on as we were having this conversation, one of them was sort of like, how do you have an uncomfortable response to thinking about people in really severely difficult situations? And that comes up for me a little bit in having this conversation, because one of the things that I find coming up the most
both with therapy clients that I'm working with and in my own circles. I have 2 young kids at home. You know, I certainly don't fall in the most vulnerable categories. You know, many of the people in my inner circles don't, and many of my clients don't necessarily. However, oh, can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay. Is with young children who are supposed to be in public school, who are now being tasked with either paying for childcare or not working. And early on in the pandemic, you know, workplaces were more flexible, but they're becoming less and less so. And that's even within the most supportive workplaces. My wife works for the state of Vermont, which has been extremely supportive. However, they're starting to talk about coming back into the office. They're having less and less options in terms of how she can be flexible with her schedule. And we're, you know, paying more than a mortgage a month in childcare for children that would otherwise be in public school. So the stress that parents are under right now is severe, emotional and financial. And when I'm talking to local legislators and I'm bringing this up at various forums, I'm just not really hearing actionable plans around how to support this sort of like subset of people. And I just feel like it's an important thing to name.
Yeah, Kate, something we're definitely hearing loud and clear all around the state in these forums. I'm gonna put you on the spot and push you a little to say, do you have a thought on what should be done? What support should be in place, and what could the state be doing to tackle that challenge? What do you think is needed?
Yeah, I mean, if it's like pie in the sky, absolutely zero limitations to what was humanly possible, and like governmental world is like the sort of subset of folks who might have like even 2 working people in the house don't qualify for any state support at all. However, we know from the numbers that like the vast majority of America is living paycheck to paycheck, regardless of what your income level is. So, you know, whether it's like direct subsidy payments to guardians or parents or people who have, because, you know, they have these childcare hubs now, which is great, but the local childcare hub is $50 a day. And if you have a child in that hub, $50 a day, 3 days a week, who you would otherwise have in public school, that's several $100s a month. So, you know, whether it's coming, you know, if it's subsidies to parents, if it's working with employers and saying, essentially sort of putting some pressure on employers to say, you have to be flexible. You have to support the fact that these parents cannot come back into the office. You know, they're asking people to use their what's the sort of like sick time that's like government mandated. That's like that you have 3 months of 90 days mandated. That's only supposed to go to sick time. That's what people are being asked to use in order to stay home and take care of their kid on the days that their kid isn't in school. That's problematic to me. You're not home sick. You're home because the system's requiring you to be home.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like things like that, looking at supporting employers and having alternative methods of providing flexibility for families and parents. I mean, I could go on. I'll stop there, but those are just some thoughts.
All right. Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that. Other thoughts on ideas of what's needed, what action is needed today? What about that community? Sorry, Greg, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think might have been on the same page there. I think it's important to name again the connectivity challenges. You know, fortunately, our schools did a lot of work in mitigating that connectivity issue that's existed for, I think, decades, maybe. You know, in the form of purchases of iPhones that have hotspots, went out to a lot of families in the Lamoille South school district. In Lamoille North, they used MiFis So a mini version of a Wi-Fi that were purchased and then distributed to families, and I believe also some staff of the schools, again, to make sure that people were able to, have some kind of connection. So we've got a lot of people trying to do some workarounds. And I think despite best efforts, we're still not at 100% for all of our students connected to schools, and then certainly not at 100% for our general population. We do have a new connectivity district, CUD, I believe, that has been established in our community, but that work, I believe, has a long ways to go, because these days, and I think this gets a little bit to what Kate was talking about, connectivity is about your employment and having options, with your employer. It's about access to resources in the community, to know what's available at the family center or at Copley Hospital or wherever it might be. And it's about being able to access your education, for our kids. So, and it's a real challenge, and even more so as you move into the eastern side of Lamoille Valley and into the Hardwick area, where the percentages go from 90% down to 80 or 70% in terms of percentage of folks with connectivity, reliable connectivity.
Yeah, it's fitting that while you were saying that, Heather is saying in the chat that her internet's unstable and she's going to have to call back in. We've all, and now Chris at the food bank is also having internet issues. Yeah, that's a real challenge all around the state. Other folks want to chime in on things that need to be done? I am curious, Jeff kind of started to talk about that kind of community food hub idea. Is that something that is that a conversation happening in the county now? Is that something that's being worked on? And Anna kind of touched on some pieces of that as well, with like central hubs with freezer and storage. Is there work going on around that today?
There have been quite a few discussions, and actually one of our assistant planner on LOSROC. This is not a pitch for LOSROC. We're not a for-profit organization, but we will take your donations or support. But created a visual image of what a food hub for our community, would look like. It's a big endeavor, multi-year. My understanding is probably 2 decades ago a food hub was discussed. So what we're trying to do at this point is just build some of the parts and pieces. But eventually, what we would love to see in the central part of the county is a facility, and as Anna talked about, a place that has a variety of storage, dry, refrigerator, freezer. I think Teresa Snow. I don't know if Teresa Snow is in our group or the other group, but
I see her on here.
Teresa and Salvation Farms have done an incredible job accessing local produce and bringing that into our food system, and especially to support our food shelves and other vulnerable populations. So to have a place where even more processing could be done. And then to know that in every one of our towns, there is a spoke that is ready to receive those food items. So when the National Guard does a food drop, tons and tons of food, that it can go to our food hub, gets sorted, and the right amount goes to Waterville, and the right amount goes to Stowe, and the right amount goes to Wolcott. So there are some images coming together. The Everyone Eats program, we did get some funding in our community, again, is helping us build some of that dot connecting that Heather talked about. But we've got a long ways to go in terms of needing infrastructure, buildings, equipment, storage, and then people power.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Any other last thoughts that people want to share and ideas? Anyone that we haven't heard from that wants to share? Barbara, Pam, Eric, others? All right.
Jenna, can I add one? I was just going to add one thing.
Yeah, please.
I think what Allison was saying earlier about bringing food to where the people were, whether like teaming up with primary care, and we talk about the transportation issues. And if people are even lucky enough to have one car and that person goes to work, then they're stuck at home with kids, and they cannot get out to access these services. And so there are, programs out there, community health worker programs where you get food and you get services to the people, especially we're in such a rural place. And so we talk about flu shots, we talk about just some basic screenings, you know, just some really basic services, and just some sort of program that we could bring those type of things to the people, to where they are. I'm just adding on to Allison.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Corey. Any other last comments before we move on to the visiting team? Anyone want the last word?
Well,
Barbara does.
RCT used to provide, like, people that live in Johnson. They used to have a bus, a mini bus, to go to Johnson on Thursdays, and could bring people into town, but they only had like 2 hours to do their shopping or whatever they needed to do, but they don't provide that anymore. I don't know what happened, but they don't offer that service anymore.
That was who offered that service?
RCT.
RCT. Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, it's RCT, or it was the little bus. I think it was one of them. It was either GMTA or RCT, one of them that would go and bring people into town on Thursdays.
And is that not offered because of COVID, or is that something that went away?
No, they
long
stopped
before?
before COVID. I don't know if they weren't getting enough people to ride in or what happened, but I know they stopped.
Yeah.
And RCT provides transportation like to medical appointments, but they got to have something from their doctor, and the person can't have their own vehicle in order to be able to get their services. And then so that makes it kind of hard too.
Yeah. So if we shift that to an idea, Barbara, are you kind of suggesting that you'd like to see a service like that come back, or maybe expand the services that they offer now to allow it to be more accessible to more people? Is that right to assume?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Barbara.
But it makes it hard if people not going to take advantage of it, like the bus services that they just recently started. Well, it went from GMTA to RCT, took over. But even though they're not charging, the last I knew that they weren't charging people to ride the bus to go from here to Stowe or go around the Marshville Loop and go to Stowe and shop or whatever they have to do, and then go back. But I don't know if I don't know how that's working, because I haven't been on the bus in a while. But they are trying to put that into use. So they figured if they didn't charge, then maybe more people would ride. But I don't know how that's working.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, let's go ahead and shift. I'd love to hear from our visiting team, your reflections, and perhaps as you think about the ideas that folks have shared and the work going on today, if there are any ideas for resources that could support this work. And I promised I would start with Chris, because her connection's been a little bit in and out, but hopefully you're with us right now.
Yes, and hopefully it'll stay. Well, thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. It's been an honor to listen to all the great work that's happening. And just a few sort of reflections and potential resources is really what you're asking of us, right, Jenna?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Just thinking about really the thing that jumped out at me was collective impact. Thinking about Lazarok and what I saw in Washington County, Winnock-Rock, that is really something that I think could be resourced and really maintained and made sustainable, to actually think about like having a backbone organization. I think about some of the accountable communities for health that the food bank's a part of, like Thrive and NEK Prosper, and also the hunger councils all over the state that really are, have those backbone organizations like Hunger Free Vermont that are really able to kind of keep the momentum moving forward by having that support. So I think that that's just a reflection that there's been major success with collective impact models when they are resourced with backbone with a backbone organization and the ability to really to do the work that needs to be done and all contribute each organization's kind of unique skills. And then, you know, thinking about, to sort of piggyback on that, shared infrastructure, the idea of a food hub is, I love that idea. And I think that could really go along with collective impact as well. Just really thinking about what is the shared infrastructure that could be available to the whole community. You know, I'm sure you know a lot about food hubs and already have done research, but I know that conversations are happening right now in Burlington with Vermont Food Bank, Feeding Chittenden and Intervale around a food hub, and it's just a planning study that's being done right now. And I'm sure that's happened in other communities as well, but that's just one community to think about maybe connecting with, because they're just in sort of conversation right now and doing planning study. I think too, just thinking a lot about, you know, I'm the one who like clapped when Dave Iacovone talked about livable wage. You know, I think lending our voices and advocacy around policy change right now, and thinking about, you know, more 3 Squares Vermont benefits, the first line of defense against hungers, 3 Squares, really advocating for an increase in those benefits. Another thing the food bank's doing with Hunger Free Vermont is we're working on a kind of public information campaign that's already started, but is really going to be kind of really exploding in January around removing the stigma from 3 Squares Vermont and SNAP. And so hopefully, you know, everyone can continue to kind of spread that message around removing the stigma. You know, I heard some people talking about folks not wanting to, like, you know, step through the door of a food shelf. And I think, you know, anything that we can do to kind of, you know, remove that stigma and really, you know, sort of change the language, I think will be helpful. And then I think just, you know, thinking about food share and the other food shelves that are in that county who've been so incredibly responsive and really adaptive and so quickly just changing models, and, you know, Lamoille Community Food Share just like opening up to everybody and changing the way that they're doing things to be more responsive. I think it's amazing, and just you know, something that hopefully can continue. And Susan already mentioned this, but, you know, there's a lot of fresh food there for folks who are, you know, really wanting to access that. And then finally, thinking a little bit about home delivery and what are some options for that. You know, talking about public transportation, is there a way to put food on public transportation buses to get those delivered out to people? Is there a way to put food on school buses? I know that's happening in different communities, and Brattleboro is one of them. So those are my reflections. Great hearing everything that's going on, and I'd love to be a resource if it's needed.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. And we will be sharing contact info of our visiting team members with everyone who attends, so you'll be able to reach out to Chris if you'd like to. Josh, do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, good conversation, everyone. Thanks for letting me listen and give some reflections. You know, first I heard, you know, Lazarok, you know, sort of did an amazing job safeguarding the county, really, from across a whole bunch of different perspectives. But the lack of housing that folks can afford is a real issue in Lamoille County. It was before this crisis. You know, you have that sort of dual housing problem of, you know, popular vacation place, big, large homes with hardly anyone living in them most of the time, and virtually no middle income housing being built in Lamoille County. I know this from the facts of, you know, Lamoille Housing Partnership does a great job building affordable housing that they can, and there's plenty of wealthy housing being built on their own, but the market does not work for middle income housing just naturally being built anymore. It hasn't kept up with the pace since the 80s, and Lamoille County has suffered as much as any other county. The market just does not work anymore for the sort of middle-sized housing that we need, that folks can afford to live off of. I heard about the sort of challenges of the food system, that, you know, in some places there's plenty of food that we're trying to get to people, and this idea of a hub, and, you know, thinking through my involvement over the past 15 years in Vermont of any sort of the Vermont Food Venture Center in Hardwick and other food hubs and starts and fits on this over the years, the tremendous sort of need and also the challenge to make it something that's sustainable, that really serves the far reaches of a county as a real food distribution center, that if you're so successful and you find the ideal place for it and pull it off, it becomes now the challenge to get the food from there in a time and in a way that is coordinated and is feasible for all the different groups involved to do with their manpower and their budgets, but that's something that clearly is needed. A lot about the food systems and delivery in different ways, and this idea of a need for better communication, sort of system integration, but yet at the same time not dismiss the sort of grassroots efforts, the sort of non-traditional places that people find help. It can't be all, just sort of a government system that's seamless, because some people will reject that and they either won't get the help or you have to provide it at a place that, they go to and they trust. This idea of maybe some ways to change and improve of a sort of a mutual aid framework, similar to fire and flood and EMS, that is more for the social service and healthcare, including mental health care. Like, we haven't really figured out a way to locally do that, that builds off the same volunteer and sort of capacity that we have, for fire, since insurance companies were formed. We found some way to ensure that locally we try to protect our property, but we haven't found a way locally to establish networks that do that for sort of human social service needs in a way that government provides an overall support and framework, but it's handled locally. And that sort of dawned on me thinking about this. And then, there's this whole piece about that I thought was great with these COVID kits, where that was a solution that seems to be something that I haven't heard in these other forums of thinking ahead and providing these sort of kits for members of the community that are experiencing crisis, whether it be recovery or mental health or whatnot. And that's really something that is something we should be sharing and seeing if others could pull that off. The piece around the parents that are trying to work and their kids normally would be in school, and the childcare costs are so expensive. I remember talking with our local solutions group, that Jenna and Paul and I are on, saying, when school starts, what are we going to do? We essentially need a subsidy for working, parents, to somehow not disrupt the whole system and bring numerous people out of the workforce, because then that's going to have a sort of a cycle of sort of a downward spiral of income coming into systems and income going out that it's going to be hard to recover from. And you're right, I haven't heard, I forget who brought that, really good solutions for this yet. We have added unemployment insurance, but that doesn't account for folks that actually do have a job that don't want to lose it, but they can't afford the childcare and are worried about their children's education. It's a pretty tough choice to put working families in. And then, the one thing I want to talk about is just a little bit of ideas for some solutions. I think short term, we've got to leverage all the CRF money that we have. And I know people we've talked about it. There's a lot of money out there making work, and we've got to use it to make these connections and try to find some ways to make them last. And that, on the food access, I heard a little bit about the shift meals. I know maybe that's not the full solution in this area, but what I sort of am concerned about is, Lamoille County is very hospitality dependent, the businesses. And if they can't be brought in with these resources to find, some way to provide that food system to keep them in business, that unemployment rate, the sort of folks that need a livable wage job, it's just there's maybe something there to use more of the restaurant hospitality industry that are needing something to do, needing work for their employers to meet some of these food needs. And then on the housing side, we talked about the CRF money. There's more rental assistance and support service funding than there ever has been. What's missing are units, and we're trying to get these units online. As we were here, I was just reading a wonderful press release from your neighbors just to the next county over in the rural edge. They just got their first 3 rehab apartments with CRF money signed, and they should be ready in a month or 2. That an owner took on a home with 3 units and is using this money, and he's already committed to serving 3 different families coming out of homelessness in those units. It was a vacant 3-room home in Lindenville last week, and it's being worked on, and it's going to be ready to house people in a month. And those sort of solutions are made possible right now with the CRF money. It's hard to connect the dots and keep up this frantic pace of work, but there's some opportunity there, like there never has been before. And just keep up the optimism and know that you're doing wonderful work for your community members. And so just thanks for your efforts.
Great. Thanks, Josh. We've only got a few minutes left. So Polly and Will, I wish we had more time here for both of you, but we'll have to keep comments fairly brief. But let's start with Will and then Polly.
Hi, everybody. It's been fabulous hearing the conversation and all the tremendous work from Lazarok and everybody else. The only thing that I'll add is that while we have done a tremendous amount to make it easier to provide help itself, I'm not sure that we have addressed the perhaps more difficult cultural work of making it safe to ask for help. And that stigma, I think, is just the most acute barrier that people face when they're dealing with these concurrent crises. That gets compounded additionally with the spirit of independence that I see in the Lamoille Valley. I'm a person who works in like 3 districts right now, and you pick up sort of some cultural differences county to county. And one particularly noteworthy thing is that people reach out for help, I've found sort of generally at a lower point in the spectrum of acuity in even just the budding county of Washington County. Like when I get involved with cases there, it might be because somebody's about to lose their home to a tax sale. Whereas when I get involved with cases in Lamoille, they're about to lose their tent that they're living in. So just to look at sort of the combination of this rugged individual, hard scrabble, like people are very tough and proud and resilient, and that's a beautiful thing. And at the same time, there is this tremendous work before us to make it safe and normal to reach out preemptively when help is needed before it gets as bad as it can get. And I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thanks, Will. Polly, last word.
I'll try to fill in some of the gaps in between, although I don't think much is left. It was really a wonderful discussion. I appreciate hearing what everyone had to say. I'd say I was struck, if not surprised, to hear how strong the focus was on housing at the beginning of the discussion, and just thought that for a rural county like Lamoille, the solutions are going to be really broad. They're going to reach from Cary and Lamoille housing partnerships building multifamily housing buildings to access to home ownership, to utilizing these new CARES Act vouchers, which come along with services to help connect people into all the other systems that they need to be connected into to be successful. So all of those are going to be at play. And something unique I heard from this discussion was your really strong focus on a concrete structure for connecting people to services with Lazarok. And I think I like the thumbs up I'm getting from Greg there. But with those lessons that you've learned, you have that ability to connect people to those resources that are out there. Around the food hub conversation, I'd say 2 areas that I've heard talk a lot about food hubs would be VHCB. I know they work with many food hubs across the state. And also I'd point folks to USDA Rural Development that has funding for community facilities and would be also interested in that conversation if and when you get to the point where you're looking at building or equipping anything. So didn't want to go without a plug for them as well. And
I just finally want to thank Kate for everything she said about childcare and the situation it's placing parents and children in. And that's going to be something we're all going to have to continue to focus on moving forward. Finally, we talked a lot about food and food distribution, and I heard a piece of the discussion about the food boxes. There's one more month of that program in October. There's some changes happening at the state level because of a USDA changing their contract with the provider, but there is another month. That program should run through October, and that means we have a month to connect people into the existing charitable food system and the food system in general, and that really means connecting people to SNAP. So I will just end with a plug for connecting people to 3 Squares Vermont.
Great. Thanks, Polly. Well, thanks everyone so much for sharing all the work that you're doing. I look around the screen and I see a bunch of heroes that are stepping in to support your community when we're facing an unprecedented need. So thank you for that work. Thank you for joining this evening and sharing. And we've got to head back to the closing session. If you, I just put the link in the chat to the closing session, but you can also find it wherever you found that opening link. It's the same link. And we'll see you back there in a moment to close things out. Thanks so much, everyone.